People say creativity or imagination is a luxury. I say it's a necessity.
Always just remind myself that this is just an opportunity to strengthen my creativity.
Because it is what gets you through the bad times.
Tap into my imagination.
But it is truly one of the most important pieces to becoming successful in my mind. Friends, today I have Victoria Gallagher on the podcast as a guest. We cover so much stuff. She was once a stockbroker, then got into hypnotherapy, meditation, law of attraction. We go over the difference of all three of those things, and then also talk about the power of creativity and imagination and how that's so important for your success. So listen in to today's episode and then learn more about a challenge that she's offering all of us that are listening. Friends, today I have Victoria Gallagher on the podcast. Victoria, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here, Jen. It was such a great episode with you on the show, and which will be airing soon. And we had such great chemistry. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, we are. I'm excited to share your story with my audience because we have similar backgrounds a little bit. You've been an amazing author. You're in this whole field of mental health and speaking and life coaching. And yes, you have so much value to add. So thank you. Thank you. All right. So tell us what's accomplishment you are most proud of.
My accomplishment I'm most proud of, I would have to say it is the fact that I've been a business owner for the past 24 years. And I have created this content empire of nearly 1,000 hypnotherapy recordings that people can just listen to in the comfort of their own home on practically every single topic. I would say that, that pretty much covers it.
I know. Well, and I'm writing a book right now, and I was going through line edits today, and we were even adding in a statistic that less than 70%, so only 30% of businesses last over 5 years in the United States, which is one of the best markets to open a business in considering globally, right? And so it's fascinating to think of how many businesses fail. And then for you to be in this industry for 24 years and have the content that you write and create be so valuable still today as it was when you first created it.
It was. And it really felt like, everything that I've done, unknowingly, I did it at the right time. Like when I got into the brokerage business back in those days, like the market just tripled from 1993 to 1999. The market went from like 3,000 to 10,000. I know like today we're in the 30,000s, but for it to triple back in that time. And then I got out, and then it was just in that same time that, I got into, hypnotherapy, meditation, and, not a lot of people like knew about this. And it's even now just starting to become more and more mainstream. And so I feel proud that at the time that I got in, it was new and not a lot of people thought about it. And same thing with, when I got into the brokerage business, I was one of 7 women out of 107 people in my...
I am sure, because even when I got into the business, which was like the early 2000s, it was rare to have women in that field. I can't even imagine back then. Okay, but here's like a crazy thing that I think we need to bring people through is you went from stockbroker to hypnotherapist, which is a huge shift. So how did you have the courage to do that shift? What did that look like? How did you know that was the next right move? Like walk us through that whole experience.
Well, I always had, from the time I was about 18, I had a little side interest in the whole personal growth, self-help realm. The very first book I ever read was Total Self-Confidence by Dr. Robert Anthony. My mom actually gifted me that book, and there was a reason for that. Went through, a lot of little events in my childhood that, took away my self-worth, my self-confidence. And so I was always a little bit like in and out of some kind of therapeutic situation from that time forward. So fast forward to being a stockbroker, I found myself kind of burnt out. Like I'd already gotten myself to like a six-figure earner in that industry. And I realized once I was there and I was comfortable, I just kind of felt burnt out, and I just had like this lack of interest. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't even have a college degree. And, being in that industry actually was an industry that required that, but I sort of pushed my way into it. So I I found myself in this 4-day personal development seminar, and it was kind of like akin to like Landmark, but a different, a lot of people are familiar with that. And, we did a lot of meditation. We did a lot of closed eye techniques. And during that time, I just kind of said, I want everybody to have this. I want everyone to experience this. And I didn't quite know how to bring it to them because I tried getting a lot of people to come to the class, and people just didn't seem to be very interested in that. And so I just said, I want to make these recordings to have, I'll just make these recordings, sell them for $20 on a website. And at that time, that kind of seemed a little far-fetched. I mean, the internet was still pretty new in 1999. But I had a boyfriend who owned a recording studio. I had another friend who was a graphic designer and a web designer. And I just utilized all my resources. And I said, I'm just going to do this. I just need to figure out how do I get the credentials to make myself legit. And that's when I stumbled upon hypnotherapy. And I said, oh, that's the ticket. So I enrolled, got certified. Next thing you know, it's like, I think I'm going to start seeing clients since I can do that now. And I was already talking to people as an investment broker. You talk to people, they are much more willing to talk about their personal issues than they are about their money. And so isn't that true? And so I would just, I opened up an office. Next thing you know, my branch manager, where I was the stockbroker, told me I had to make a decision, and between doing this and doing my new business. And so I made a decision, and I literally just jumped into the deep end of the water with literally it was sink or swim, no safety net, no money, actually spending more money than was coming in at that time. And I actually had to leave a lot of investments on the table that weren't vested yet where I was working. And, and so it's just, I don't really recommend other people, unless you're put into that situation, to just up and leap and quit their job. But, it was just something that I had to do. And I just didn't, to me, it just didn't feel like there was any choice, because I was just dying inside, and I was just kind of feeling like this just isn't for me anymore. And,
well, and the unique thing about your career transition is that you were going in like meditation and hypnotherapy. It's a very still, calming, gentle transition for your nervous system. So it's not going from one high-paced, chaotic external environment to another one. And because you were already so grounded in the practice, you probably knew like, hey, this isn't ideal for most people, but considering my background and my training, I'm able to self-soothe through this big eruption in my life.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because during the first year and a half, even though I had these tools for self-soothing and I had these tools for empowering my mindset, for a little while after I was put into that situation, I stopped using the tools. And that, was like, it was so ironic, and it was so, what's the word I'm looking for? It was so, when you tell somebody to do something and you're not doing the same thing.
Here's the thing that's interesting that you say on this, right? When you're doing something that's working, and then you stop doing it, even though it's working, right? Because it becomes tedious or becomes like, oh, I think I'm above this. I think I'm past this or whatever else like that. I love like honing in on this principle a little bit because in the climbing world, as you start climbing a wall, you might be like, oh, this is a really easy section. I don't need to rope off, or I don't need to put all the safeties in or whatever. We'll be fine. And that's when the accidents happen. Like no matter what, when you're climbing, you have to do all the tedious little details because otherwise you're taking on undue risk. And there's plenty of risk in climbing, let alone if you don't do the little steps in between. But everybody that's listening, hear the sound of, yes, I had the tools, but they only work if I use them. They don't work if I'm not putting them to play.
It's so true. And so many people, they feel like, and I did at the time myself, kind of fall into this trap of like, it's a one and done, deal. It's the same thing that happens even, I've been up and down the scale with my weight. I come from a very, morbidly obese, background, not myself, but my family. And it scared the bejesus out of me, whatever that means. And I made a decision early on that was never going to happen to me. But, my weight every once in a while, it creeps into this territory. And then, you do the things, you use the tools, you use the mindset, you do the dieting, you do all the habits that get you into the perfect shape. And then what happens? You start to like, oh, I can eat a little bit more of this, and I can eat a little bit more of that, and I can eat a little bit more of that. And before you know it, you're back to your old habits again. And so it's the same thing when it comes to practicing the law of attraction, practicing hypnosis, practicing meditation, all of the stress relieving, practices, all of it. It's like you have to keep going to the gym. You have to keep working out your mindset. It's like, it's like vitamins. You can't just keep taking them, for a week and expect them to work for you for the rest of your life.
Exactly. Now, you talk about these three things, which I'd love to have you distinguish between the difference for the audience. So you talk about meditation, you talk about law of attraction, and you talk about hypnosis. So can you give us a little background on each one of those areas, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting with meditation. So meditation, is really about quieting the mind and learning to get control over the automatic default thinking that we have in our mind. We're constantly chattering away inside of our minds. We're thinking about 70 thoughts on average in a given day. And most of those 70 thoughts that we're thinking are on autopilot. They're the same thoughts we were thinking yesterday. They're below the conscious mind, and they're negative, like the vast majority of them. So what meditation does is it really just allows us to, it's kind of an exercise for the mind. It just allows us to focus on a single object. And whenever a thought comes in, just get back to thinking about that object. And when you do that, you just gain much more control and power over your mind. So hypnosis, whereas meditation is just kind of, there's no necessary intention involved in it. Where hypnosis comes in, hypnosis is where there is more of an intention, and it's where you're intentionally conditioning and reprogramming the subconscious mind. So you have your conscious mind, which you're always aware of, and then you have your subconscious mind, which is where all of your habits, emotions, programs are stored. And so you go into hypnosis really to intentionally reprogram all of those old beliefs, so that you can break through and do things that you that you haven't been able to manage through just conscious willpower. The law of attraction is really more about, it's not a way of thinking. It's the principle and it's the philosophy, that whatever we spend the majority of our time thinking about, feeling, vibrating, we are typically going to attract those things into our lives. And so we want to use tools like hypnosis, like meditation, to help us to retrain ourselves, retrain our minds, retrain our emotions, retrain our actions to be more in alignment, with getting what we want to, getting our life to, getting the experiences to happen in our lives that we want to experience.
I like those definitions. Yeah, no, it does. So you left and we'll go back to your conversation where you left being a stockbroker, you got into this work, you kind of became a little bit of a hypocrite and were not practicing this work. So then what turned you into practicing it again and walking the talk?
So what happened was, in the first year that I was in business, again, this takes this back in like 1999. Here I was, I just was given this old ultimatum. And, before that, here I was practicing. I was making these amazing recordings. I was seeing clients. I was, had a very nice balanced, way of living. But then, I get this ultimatum and I have to quit. And I am just like, just completely like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I went into like a state of fight or flight. And I literally just started just grinding, just creating all of these programs. Even though I wasn't listening to these programs, I'm like creating all these programs. I'm learning, how to sell. I'm learning how to market. I'm just gobbling up things as fast as I could. And I'm staying up all hours of the night, but the money just wasn't coming in. And I was running out, and I started having to borrow money from people to stay in business. And people started telling me, oh, maybe you should get a second job. And I was like, something just told me that, well, the same energy that I would be using on a second job, I could be putting into my business. But for whatever reason, it just, whatever I was doing wasn't working. And so I got off the phone with the last friend that I was going to borrow money from, which was the most humiliating thing. I was never in that role before of borrowing money from people. It was like, what the heck is happening here? And I broke down. I just like, it sounds so dramatic, but I just fell to my knees on the floor and I just started crying. I'm like, this isn't me. Like, what happened to me? And why is this happening to me? And I was kind of in this little poor me zone for a minute. And all of a sudden I kind of hear this voice from within, and I start almost like I could see myself from outside. Like I could see the smoke clear and the fog clear, and I could see like, this is just an illusion. Like, this is just something I'm experiencing. Like, this isn't even really real. And I start hearing like, take responsibility. You're not listening to your own medication. You're kind of being a hypocrite, and what you need. And I just heard all of the messages that I needed to hear, whether, God, a higher source, whatever it was. It just told me that I needed to do what I'm teaching other people to do. And so I did. And I just started, I started writing, I started journaling, I started reading, I started just like dedicating that time to my mind. And before you knew it, it was like, oh, here's a great idea. Why don't I do this? And, and it really just took me to a place where I'm much, much more calm, because when you're so stressed out, your brain is constricted.
Yeah, well, and the blood flows not getting to all the different areas. So then you're not tapping into all the resources that you have available to become creative or to self-soothe or to wind down or to be energetic and just balance everything out. Now, you mentioned like you got into writing. Well, I mean, you've written 4 books. Not only did you get into writing, you got into writing. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that write. Not everybody's published 4 books in their lives. So let's not gloss over that piece. And when you got into the books, did they come to you? Did you say, hey, I need this for myself, so I want to get into this topic deeper because then I'll learn and heal me and then help heal others? Tell me the journey of the book writing.
Yeah. So a couple of the books I wrote before I, published the main book. Like I didn't actually publish any of the books. I just kind of started writing some books, like just to give away, just to kind of, and so like the first book that I wrote it was a book that I wanted to, I wrote it to turn it into a course, really. So it was this book called, Attract Good Luck. And I never, so I actually wrote that before I wrote Practical Law of Attraction. So moving forward to the Practical Law of Attraction, which was really my first real published book. What happened there was I started speaking at a lot of different hypnosis conferences, and when I was asked to speak at one of the events, they also asked me would I do a pre-conference. And a pre-conference is where you do like a couple day event before the conference. And they wanted me to, her suggestion was a certification course on law of attraction. And I'm like, because, I was always going on Facebook Live. I was always talking about law of attraction, but I never had any, other than some of my hypnosis recordings. I never really had any official law of attraction content out there. And it was something I was kind of known for. And so I said, well, I don't really have a curriculum in which to teach law of attraction. I mean, I just talk about it. I talk about what's on my mind and the things that I'm learning about, and the YouTube videos that I've made. And so I thought to myself, well, I guess maybe it's time to go ahead and write a book. And aside from that, I had been getting bugged by a few of my clients. They're like, you should write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book. And I kept saying, I don't have time to write a book. I don't have time to write a book. But, between not having time to write a book and not having time to create this law of attraction training, I said, I think it's time to go ahead and write that book. And so what it was just really me putting down pen to paper everything that I had learned over the last 20 years. And, and I really felt like what kind of came to me was there was a system that I was using, but I didn't really have it defined. Like I knew that you had to get your thoughts in alignment. I knew you had to feel a certain way. I knew, and so I'm just pulling together, like, what are the things that make law of attraction work? And I came up with, at first I had like 10 different principles, which ultimately sort of combined into like feelings and vibration sort of became one thing. Expectations and beliefs sort of became one thing. And so I came up with this 8 manifesting conditions. And I started testing it out and it worked. Every single time it worked. And so that's what became my book. Practical Law of Attraction. And it's practical. It's it does have a little bit of the spiritual side in it, but most of it is just, it's a practical system that anyone and everyone does use to create success in their life.
Right. Some of us are just more conscientious of it, and some of us are just naturally doing these things, and these is what working and these are not working. And I like how you had these different ideas and then started combining them once you started going through them more and then saying, okay, in practice, this is how it really plays out. Because I do feel we get these ideas, and once you start putting them on paper, then you really start giving them form and shape and understand how everything comes together. And then you test drive it, right? You try it out on a few people and say, okay, yes, I'm getting results. And if I'm getting results, this is turning into a book. That's been my journey and my book writing process of, okay, here's lessons that I took from the mountain. I'm going to share some of these with some people. Are they having results? Are they understanding it? Are they able to apply these principles to their own lives? And when you see that result, you're like, okay, we need to share this with more people. This is working. I love it. It's so energizing and rewarding.
It is. It absolutely is. I love it. And I used a lot of the principles of the law of my book, Practical Law of Attraction, to actually publish the book and market the book. And so that was the other thing too, is like, I felt like, well, I can't exactly write a book like this and not become a number one bestseller. Right. And so I had to, like pull in the resources and really, and I attracted a lot of the resources. One of the fun things was at the beginning of the book, you always have your endorsements. And so before I even really had any kind of relationship with Bob Doyle or Joe Vitale or, any of these people, or even Michael Lozier, who wrote the foreword for the book, which this was the very first book he ever wrote a foreword for. I wrote their names in the beginning of the book. I wrote their names and I put a little lorem ipsum dolor, with their names. And so every time I would start writing, I would always start at the beginning and I always would see their names. And then, when I came time to start getting those endorsements, it was just like they had already done it. They had already agreed energetically. It was there. And it was just a matter of like the universe sort of conspiring to put me in touch with them. And it did.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that because when I have the goals of the different mountains that I had big posters of them in my room. And depending on what mountain I was climbing next, I had the poster of that mountain in my room. So every time I entered or exited my room, I looked at it. I kind of felt with it, became one with the mountain. I said, okay, we're going to summit you. So let's figure out what we need to do and who needs to be on my team to make this happen. And really just visualizing that in my head, putting it down on paper, and then letting it come to me and say, okay, here's who I want to work with, or here's how this team's going to work, and here's what we're going to do. And I think we should leave these days. And it sounds woo-woo, but it is something that just anchors you into where you want to be. And then I feel like you rise to the occasion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'm sure that you doing what you do, I mean, you must understand the power of visualization and the imagination. And just to me, the two are kind of different things, but they're using the same part of your mind. So like when you're visualizing, you're sending messages out, into the universe, but you're sending message to the universe, but you're also sending message to your own subconscious mind. And then, the answers come back to you through your imagination. And, when you tap into the imagination, it's just really amazing the things that can the answers that can come and the resources that can come, and it just helps you in so many ways.
Oh, I will tell, people say creativity or imagination is a luxury. I say it's a necessity. Like creativity and imagination is a necessity, especially when things are going bad. So when you're on the mountain and you're hearing avalanches or the weather's not playing in your favor or any of these little things, if you do not get control of your mind right then and there, you're going to lose it. And so I remember being on Mount Logan. And there was this horrible windstorm going on and snow was blowing all over the place. And I was wearing pink goggles. So these pink lenses were on my head. So to me, everything had a pink hue to it. So I was thinking, oh, I'm in a cotton candy machine, that the cotton candy is getting blown around this machine and it's fluffing into this great sugar. And on top of that, there's a rope that I'm tied to the instructor in front of me. And because of the lenses of the glasses, this rope all of a sudden looks like a watermelon rind because the flecks and the green and all the thing. And I remember at the time, the song Watermelon Sugar High was popular. So I'm sitting here thinking like watermelon sugar high, played in the like this cotton candy machine. Life is amazing. This is fine. And then our alarms went off. And alarms go off. That means you need to eat. When you're at altitude, a lot of times you don't have the hunger signal. So then you don't think about it. And then it becomes too late by the time you do think about it. So here I am playing the song in my head, having a great time. We stop for the snack. I bump my goggles and I realize we're in this whiteout, horrible, nasty storm that is the farthest thing from Candyland that you could possibly imagine. And everybody is like, what? Where have you been? Like, we've been in this storm forever. How is your energy or your personality or everything so different than all of ours? Because they're exhausted and worn out. And the story that they're telling to themselves is changing the experience that we're both experiencing at the same time. And so, I mean, it's fascinating. That example is a story that I keep on speed dial. And it just reminds me like, you have to be so good with your imagination and with creativity because it is what gets you through the bad times. And we all are going to have bad times at different times in our lives, and they're going to manifest different ways. But it is truly one of the most important pieces to becoming successful in my mind.
It really is. You know, any time that I've ever been faced with any kind of, challenges, I always just remind myself that this is just an opportunity to strengthen my creativity and tap into my imagination. I have done some physical adventures as well, not quite to the degree that you have. But like when I was training for doing marathons, like I literally went from like a non-runner to, okay, I'm going to run, 20 minutes to 30 minutes to 5K to from the 5K to marathon. And, and then from marathon to like 5 marathons. And, but when I was out there, training, for one of those marathons, I would use the imagination, and it's something you almost like, I think you'll agree with me. You have to do it. You have to do it early on. Otherwise, sometimes when the negative imagination can take over, and it's much, much harder to turn it around. So you have to be very proactive with your imagination. And so whenever I would, go out there, like any kind of thought, of like, oh, I'm getting tired, or I'm running out of energy, or I'm whatever, you just have to you just have to change that immediately. And so one of the things that I would use to change it is I would imagine all the little things around me, like the trees, the cars, the side, whatever is around me, I would use that as people. And I would imagine that those are people, they're just clapping and they're cheering, and they're just like, those people are just like cheering me on. And you just find yourself, or the other little imagination technique I would use is I would pick something like kind of far away, and I would imagine that there is like a rubber band between me and that thing. And it would just like give me a surge of energy, either one of those things. And it's just amazing. I mean, nothing happened. I didn't take anything. I didn't drink anything. It's just the mind. The mind can give you anything that you want. It can give you that energy. It can give you that idea. It can give you that ambition. It can give you anything that you need, any kind of resource that you need to take yourself to that next level. And, whether you're, in a good place or a negative place, you can always just tap into the power of our mind. And that's why I love this work so much, because it's everything. I mean, it's even more important than health, because without the mind, we don't have our ability to be healthy. It's more important than money. It's more important than, any possible thing that we could have, because it is the thing that creates all that.
That's so true. So true. And this brings us into your running a 5-day manifest abundance challenge, right? So talk to us about that, because this is going to be available to all the listeners. So listen in.
Yeah. So yeah, every single day during this 5-day Manifest Abundance Challenge, you get a special meditation. You get there's 7 different things that you do every single day. It takes about an hour of your time. So there's there's a meditation, there's a video. The video, I wanted the videos to be about 7 minutes. They're 20 minutes, of course, because I always have a lot to share. This is the Manifest Abundance Challenge is a little bit more spiritually based. So it's really about establishing your connection with the universe, with God, with your higher self. And then there's always an affirmation that it's based upon. And then there's a visualization, and there's a writing assignment and a workbook. And so every day you go through and you do your your assignment for the day, and it just really helps to make you feel connected to the universe, and just to believe in your ability to be abundant.
I love it. I'm signing up. I'm in. Okay, so how do our guests find you to learn more? Because you have an amazing website filled with a ton of resources and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, so the main website is victoriamgallagher.com, and from there people will be able to learn about the courses, the app, the books, the individual hypnosis programs, coaching, all of that. It's just a hub for all things Victoria Gallagher.
I love it. I love any hub that's all things Victoria Gallagher. Are you kidding me? That's amazing. Well, thank you for joining us today. We'll have notes in the show about how you guys can join the 5-day Manifest Abundance Challenge. And then go to her website. There's a wealth of resources, as you've heard today, on all the things mindset, which is the core of what becomes possible in our own lives.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, listeners, for also listening to today's show.